Welcome back, my fellow Cashew enjoyers. Today in the server, I'm working on what is by volume my largest project yet. It's a very geometric and futuristic base that holds several farms, and it looks like the future. Now what exactly is it going to make, you might ask? Well, let me feed it to you in little, easily digestible pieces. First up, we've got the main focus of the farm, Guardians. These squishy little monsters are aggressive atrocities that spawn and lurk around ocean monuments. They shoot lasers at anything that gets close enough, and so they pose a threat to any unprepared player. But, important caveat, I am not unprepared. I am beyond prepared. But before I delve into catching some ugly fish, I'll need to do some terrible labor. See, the best way that I can get a good looking farm that works well is by actually draining an ocean monument. And that sucks, but I promise it'll be worth it. And to be clear, I mean it sucks for me. You guys get to watch it in 50 times speed, so you're the real winners here, not me. I've looted tons of ocean monuments in the past, but there's only one that works really well for the layouts of portals that I have in the Nether Hub. I found it really early into my world, about 20 months ago, and I knew that I'd use it eventually. But lazy as I am, I let it sit there for over a year, unbothered. So in fairness, I gave the Guardians a really long grace period. But now I'm bulldozing their house down. The first step in making room for this farm was making a cobblestone perimeter, which I would be building inside of. In hindsight, I really should not have chosen cobblestone, because of how long it takes to break. I should have used stone instead, since it can be instantly mined with a haste 2 beacon. But sometimes, I'm stupid, and that's okay. I'm the only one who has to deal with the consequences after all. Now, some of you may have also noticed the monument is actually not in the center of this perimeter, and that's intentional. Like I mentioned earlier, it's better for farms I make to line up well with the Nether Hub, but since I can't move the spawn point of the ocean monument, I have to work around it a little bit. See, this rectangle is actually perfectly in line to be symmetrical inside of the Nether Hub. If that doesn't make sense, don't worry, it's not incredibly important. Anyways, with the perimeter in place, I got to work draining the box in kind of an odd way. If the monument was in the way of anything I might build to drain the box, I had to section it off into little rectangles where I would use the sponges I'd gathered from all the other ocean monuments I've looted before. But I needed to use a machine that's really common for this type of thing, and so I spammed hundreds of sand blocks to section it off just like I needed. Given the time to do all of this though, I knew I couldn't do this for the whole box. It would take months, and I mean more months than the whole project actually did in the first place. It was just a temporary solution, and it was pretty much the next best option. So I went with it. I dedicated a ton of time to draining this thing, with several hours across several sessions. Each time I'd clear out a rectangle, I'd break all the sponges, break the previous wall of sand, using the gravity mechanics and torches, and then I'd make a new rectangle inside of the water. This was the cycle that I would need to go through over and over again to drain the actual monument. And it got old fast. This ended up being a painfully tedious project. And most of the time I was doing this, it felt like there was an eternity ahead of me. But I am very stubborn, and I wanted to see it through. I had sunken too much time into this project already to quit now. Once the shape of the monument started to peek through though, I found that it was a lot easier to keep going and stay motivated. Honestly, every time I broke down a wall, it was pretty fun. Something about watching the sand fall so fast was mesmerizing, and it almost made the time invested actually worth it. Almost. After what must have been an entire month of grinding, I finally moved on to the next step in draining this gigantic box. I would need to make this other helpful machine for clearing water, and this time I'd be doing horizontal layers rather than these big rectangles. And once I saw this thing run, I was really excited. I wish I'd recorded myself. I'd never made a machine like this before, and it was really fun to watch. It was a giant flying machine that just got rid of water. It was so cool. Of course, there was a little issue where the outer walls would still need to be drained, but that was so much better than having to build those stupid rectangles and use all that sand. This was definitely the better way to go about draining the water. I just needed to break the machine and build it a few blocks lower, and then I could just run it again. This is an unbelievable amount of time, and for this machine I am grateful. I'm grateful because I actually didn't design it. It was designed, as far as I know, by a channel called Silent Whisperer, which I've linked in the video description below. Now, another small issue with this machine is that any blocks in its path would break it, so I had to break those blocks first before I'd run it. Again, totally worth it. This machine was one of my best discoveries in a long time. I don't know why, but it made me so happy every time I used it. I only had to do this a few more times before all that was left was a single layer of water, which I just removed by placing moss blocks and sponges for convenience. This proved to be even simpler than using any machines was. In very little time, I was pretty much done with all the water. Next up was a little bit of mining, which felt a ton easier than the draining process actually was. But like most stages of this build, it still took a very long time. It was thousands of blocks that I had to mine, so I really had to put the mine in Minecraft to get where I needed. The beacon certainly helped at least. Those were a really good investment from, I think, my Shulker Farm video? I'm not totally sure when I got them, but they really are amazing. Anyways, I had finally leveled the box, and it was time for the big dividing wall to come down. I was reminded of how everyone in Europe felt when the Berlin Wall was taken down. Very exciting reunification of two very different sides. My next little goal was taking down the actual ocean monument, which, given how it was made of prismarine, wasn't so bad. It was just the removing of water inside, which proved to be a little hard. But I've beaten water's older brother, the ocean, already, so this was just a walk in the park. Now, it was about time for some really futuristic stuff, so I cleared out the last of what was left in debris all around the box and finally got to building instead of destroying. The first priority was what I announced several minutes ago, which is the Guardian Farm. With the blocks I would get from the Guardian Farm, I could make the other farms and make the futuristic atmosphere that I so badly wanted. Step 1, of course, the bottom of the farm, which would use soul sand to make jet streams which would end up shooting the Guardians upwards. I should also mention at this point that the farm took a lot of inspiration from a video from a channel called ThatMoonshine. Again, the link to the video is in the description because I consider myself an honest and fair creator. Also, H-Bomber Guy and his war on plagiarism has deeply scared me, and I will never not credit someone again. Now back to the build. Once I finished the walls, we were going strong. I just had to add some water and it was pretty much working. The last step when getting it to work was just adding the roof so the little guys wouldn't just hop out. And once that was done, the farm was functional, ugly as it may be. Now just for some clarification, there are a lot of boring steps I'm leaving out about gathering materials. I spent a ton of time doing this, but that's not important, so you don't have to see much of it. Now what I do want you to see is the floor that I started making for the Gecko farm that was about to be made. With the Guardian farm operational, I had access to several new blocks like prismarine bricks, and most importantly, sea lanterns. And as it turns out, these blocks, when you add concrete into the mix, are some of the best for making a futuristic block palette. And that made it possible to make this beauty of a floor. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a very geometric build focused on symmetry, and the floor was no exception to that. Now real quick, while you watch me finish up the floor, I'd like to mention that the Cashew Time Discord server is still open. If you'd like to keep track of the builds that I'm working on or provide some suggestions, this is where you can do that. Of course, YouTube comments work too. Your call. Anyways, the link is in the video description. Also, subscribe, please. I make lots of these. Anyways, back to the build. With the floor finished, it was time for what was only the most logical next step, making the walls and the pieces that would connect the floors to the walls. This is where the build starts getting very concrete heavy when it comes to the materials. And since I don't yet have a farm for those blocks, this ended up taking a very long time. And I know I say that about almost every step, but it's always true. This video took like 4 months after all. Next, I got some dark prismarine, which was a little harder to come by, and I started finishing up the basis of what would be the 2 big columns inside the big build. The first column was of course the Guardian farm itself, but this one would be the storage unit for the upcoming 2 farms, which I'll get to shortly. Now, we'd gotten to replacing the cobblestone perimeter with the actual blocks I needed. Again, I really shot myself in the foot by choosing cobblestone, but I made do. To make this step a little easier, I would sometimes use scaffolding blocks while I was replacing the cobblestone, but as it turns out, scaffolding blocks really suck. It's better just to use stone blocks instead. So once I got to the last couple of layers for the box, that's exactly what I did. Got some stone blocks as a little platform. And by the time I'd finished those couple of layers, the slightly more intricate parts of the wall were next. I was going to build a little glass window around most of the box before it reached the surface level. And at that point, we were getting some serious levels of fancy. Next up was the little hanging canopy of concrete, which marked the point at which the box was at sea level. From here on, the building would be a little bit easier. With the concrete in place, I added a lining of stairs as a border, and touched it up with some supporting warp stem blocks as little columns hidden beneath them. And by the way, I know there's a lot of spinning, but bear with me, it was a lot to do in one sitting. And of course, with these pillars on one side, I still had to put them on the other side as well, which was just as easy. Another little problem that I was running into at this point was getting ink sacks for all the black concrete and dark prismarine. While it would have been smarter for me to have just made a squid farm early on, I'd gone so far without it that I just went hunting for squid instead. That meant just flying along rivers and swooping in to kill them whenever I found a bunch of them. I killed somewhere in the ballpark of 1,000 squids for this video, and I do regret it, but at least it was a little fun at the time. So there was also an issue of getting blue dye, which I solved by going to a local valley biome and stealing every cornflower I could find. Now I finally got around to starting the other column I was talking about. Now most of the materials here I've explained where I got, but the crying obsidian in the middle took me almost my entire supply of gold by trading with piglins. I tried so many times to get a clip of it, but it never seemed to work. I'm still not really sure why. Anyways, once this room was done and the ceiling was installed, I also added a bridge to connect these 2 columns together. Next up, I finally went back to fix the ugliness of the first column, which was still the actual Guardian farm. The stone was really easy to replace, so this wasn't hard at all. The design for this column was almost identical to the other one I just made, so it was already familiar. Now we got into the more major structures, namely the big rectangular dome which would cover the entire box. This consisted mostly of glass, so it was a pretty repetitive process of placing blocks. Lots of hours had to be invested gathering glass and then placing it, but it wasn't anything too complicated, just another time sink. I was also using the client-side mod Matica with autoplace, which sped up the process even more. After just a few hours of grinding, spamming blocks, and slowly climbing higher, we finally reached the ceiling of the build. It was at this point that I finally ran out of sand for the glass and had to do a beach run, but it wasn't that bad. Now, in a rare twist of events, which I assumed to be a bug, I somehow got the replay mod to show me building the roof with both shaders and the Distant Horizons mod, so I can finally show a better picture of where the farm is in relation to the other ones. And by now, the visuals of the farm were almost done. But I launched back into the functional parts again, this time with our second digestible piece, Slime Farm. Slime Farm design was brought to you by a channel called Nuvola MC. I needed to dig out most of the slime chunk beneath the rectangle, and then I needed to make little platforms where the slimes would be spawning. Next, I had to place some bait for the slimes, which meant iron golems. There were maybe 10 layers of these, and to the bottom, I had to make a collection system which used a few shenanigans to grab all the slime balls through magma blocks. And from there, once I added some pipes, the farm was done. From there, I added a couple of AFKing platforms for the farms, which for some reason seemed to really break the replay mod. Still no clue why, my game kept crashing, but I got it to work eventually. After the platforms came the little water columns that would help players who didn't have Elytra reach those platforms. This was just another straightforward step and didn't take very long at all. And then I finally moved on to the last farm of this gargantuan box I've made, which was going to be a honey farm. More generally, a bee farm. It was going to make honey and honeycomb, but it did take an incredibly long amount of waiting for the bees to come out of their hives and to breed them, so I didn't actually get good footage of the build. Instead, you just get to see the finished product. We have 2 rows that generate honey and 1 row that generates honeycomb, and these are all moved through pipes to reach this storage box here, where they're stored on either side. I also installed some replacement chests that would allow me to restore the glass bottles and the shears the farm used. Neither of these are too crazy, just about 100 honey bottles and 150 honeycomb per hour. The slime farm makes close to 500 slime balls an hour. These two are more like secondary farms to the Guardian farm, so they're not incredibly advanced. The Guardian farm, however, makes about 2,400 prismarine crystals, 2,400 rock cod, and 4,800 prismarine shards per hour, which is a far more impressive yield. Now finally, I'll show you the finished project, which was done with some minor adjustments like storage machines and some small cosmetic changes too. I've passed the 20-month mark in my world recently, and this is the next major development. Across 4.5 months, I made this beautiful blue box, which will solve a lot of my resource problems for the future. Now we can build with sea lanterns and make flying machines with slime and honey blocks. It really opens up a lot of options. This does feel like some of my best work. It makes me just that little bit closer to having every farm that's possible in Minecraft. I don't quite know what the next project will be, but if you'd like to see it, be sure to subscribe and leave a like. Comments are sure to help the algorithm too, so leave your thoughts and suggestions down there too. You can also join the Discord if you'd really like to keep up with my projects. Thanks for watching, and there's one last thing to include.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Live Mason reaction.
Wait, live Mason reaction to what? What am I doing? Wait, can I say on YouTube? Is that a bad word? Wait. Musky, can you just blur it out whenever I say it so that it's like totally ambiguous what I'm saying?
Sure.
Can I say?
There is a Guardian farm, slime farm, and a honey farm.
So, is your server called MILF Hub?
I don't believe that's it. No.
Oh,
The
alright,
Cashew
what's it
Time
called?
server.
All right, I'll see you, man. Where are we going?
Do you know how to reach the iron farm?
I'm just following you, dude.
Wait, you are? Where are you?
I'm behind you.
Oh, I see you. Okay.
Well, now I have a sense of where things are.
All right, cool.
Holy shit!
First of all, let's
This thing is
have a look.
massive.
I know, right? First, have a look at this bottom left chest. There's just some slime. Yep, 2 double chests full of honey bottles.
Okay.
And over
okay.
here, on this side, it makes honeycomb. Follow me. In these corners, we have the storage units.
Hey, look, there's like chests to store stuff.
Yeah. See, in the other corners, we had chests, but here we have entryways to the farms. This is where all the slimes go to die. Okay.
This one is most certainly less janky. Oh shit. There's like at least 5 bees in this whole farm, dude.
That's true. What did I
I'm
just
stuck in a
hear?
cobble.
What was... Oh, bro.
Yo, what happens if I break all this redstone?
Don't. Wait, they killed each other.
Like, where are the guardians?
Yep, it's spawning, for sure.
Oh god. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna do that.
That works too. Okay.
I made another hole.
Okay.
Very exciting and very cool.